Welcome to Off the Post. I'm Russ Cohen. We've got Anthony Mingione. And how are you?
I'm doing okay, Russell. How are you today?
Doing good. And Michael Jello, how are you?
I was doing good until I started talking to you guys.
Well, Mike, if you woke up a little earlier today, you might have been on top of things.
Yes, I'm a bum. What can I say?
You snooze, you lose. All right. So let's talk about. I guess we'll talk about the Rantanen trade first because
I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, there's other things.
Priority order it right now.
Let's bury the lead. Come on.
Sometimes you want to lead up to it, Sometimes
just go. People are going to turn this. Start listening to this. They're going to go right in.
There's a couple of aspects of this. First one is, it's clear that Colorado didn't want to trade Mikko Rantanen, but they had to because they saw they couldn't sign him.
Would you describe it as some? We have some media who are describing this as a panic move on the part of the Avalanche.
I don't think so.
I don't agree with that. I think that's
I don't agree with
very
that.
much. I think that sounds to me like spin.
Yes,
From probably
people who are trying to get Rantanen.
People are trying to get who are trying to get him, and it sounds good to say that because it sounds very insidery.
No, and I think Chris McFarland summed it up well. He said, "Listen, he's got the rights of free agency, but we just can't make it work."
Yeah,
right.
Well, I mean, I think the landscape was sort of laid out by Elliott last night on the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, where he put up the list of top salaries in the league, and Draisaitl gets a new deal. I think it was $14 million, and he topped Matthews. And you can't deny that Rantanen deserves to be up there with a couple 100-point seasons, with winning a Stanley Cup. He's a power forward. He's a great player. But the problem was that the highest paid winger is Artemi Panarin, and they don't want to pay more than what McKinnon's making. I think it's 12.6. So that was the limit, and clearly his agent was saying we want more than 12.6.
Well, here's the thing.
That's going up.
Yeah, and you're right, and Elliott's right, but this is where the agent got it wrong. Not only do the Avalanche not want to pay that, nobody wants to pay a winger that. That's the problem in this league right now is if you're a high-scoring winger, you're going to reach your limit way before a center or a defenseman.
And
that's the way it is.
Adding to the mix here, it's not lost on me that he was – there's positives and negatives to this trade for Mikko Rantanen. One is he's going to another team that's a Stanley Cup contender. He's going to a team that has players he's familiar with, obviously, and friendly with, and like in Sebastian Aho and quite a few other Finns that are on the
yeah.
But the flip side of that is he's been traded to a team that's run by Tom Dundon, and that's going to be the way the Carolina sort of operates is kind of outside. The way Dundon operates is going to be outside those normal parameters in terms of when we get to the offseason. Right now, this trade is all about the now for Carolina.
Yeah, it's a rental as far as I see.
Being able to retain Rantanen.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to have to be, in my mind, an adjustment for Carolina. Do I think, Rantanen's looking to set the market. There's no question about that for wingers, and understandably so. The question's going, but again, you're going up against I don't want to say against, but he's going to be negotiating with an owner who likes to do things a little differently.
Yeah, I don't think Tom Dundon will pay $14 million for Mikko Rantanen a year.
No.
There's no way.
Well, this is the reason why he won't do it, because now he's got Sebastian Aho locked up long term. He's got Svechnikov locked up long term. He's got Seth Jarvis locked up long term. He's paid those guys, but he hasn't paid them what they would get on the open market. No. Now, Rantanen, he's probably going to have to make him, easily the highest paid winger. He's probably going to have to pay him more than what McDavid's making and more than what Matthews is making because the cap is going up to probably $100 million in the next couple of years. And if you don't think that that's going to sow dissent on that team when everybody took a little bit less to stay in Carolina because Dundon is this fiscally responsible guy and then he shoots his wad on Mikko Rantanen, you got another thing coming. I think it would possibly destroy that team.
So
I don't know if it would destroy the team per se. You're acquiring. You have to remember that there is, if you're going to probably adjust your tact here, if your team has been knocking on the door, but as Russ has always pointed out, they haven't had a really like a bellwether winger that or a scorer on their team that can get them past the conference. They can get them into past the conference finals and finally into the cup. Some of those players probably in that circumstance, you could say it's going to sow discord, but as a squad, you haven't gotten to where you should have been.
Well, clearly the
Tulsky's motivation. I get it.
And that's Tulsky's motivation. I look at that, Russ, is obviously there's stages to all this with Rantanen. You want to, if he performs in the playoffs, if he is that bellwether winger, and you get to the cup final and maybe win it with him.
Right. Then you can't let him go.
Then it gets and the rest of that team's going to pretty much, you can say it's going to sow discord, but if it's a move that gets you over the top and into the final or win it, the players will be like, you need that finishing piece.
And I'm not comparing the two because they're two radically different players, but this is the same playbook that they played last year getting Guentzel. And Guentzel is a great player, but he's a smaller player. Rantanen's they're not the same. I
also don't fit. And the style that if you watch Carolina and how they play, Mike,
right?
They are very much a board work team.
Yeah, they play big boy hockey.
And you heard Tulsky say it. He pointed out Jordan Martinook and how he's a heavy player that he is. You were looking for a player that can do that plus have a higher skill level to kind of also spark the rest of the roster too.
But clearly their blueprint does not match what every observer over the last 5 or 6 years has looked at that team and said, what is the chink in your armor? And the chink in their armor is the goaltending. And they wasted not wasted, but they gave up a lot of assets to get Rantanen. And now you still don't have a goalie that you trust. I mean, obviously Brendan Moore doesn't trust Kochetkov if they're going to go back to Freddie Anderson.
I know this is crazy that we're
in another stage here to this, though. We still have, again, getting the bigger business of Rantanen done.
Yes.
Now frees Carolina up. We've heard potentially.
Okay, but Gibson just went out with a UBI, so that's not a great thing for.
It's not long term.
It's not, but it's not long. Exactly, it's not long term. So we can say that, but there's still time yet. A little time left here, especially when we get up to about 4 nations or anything to kind of clear him, and then he's back. And then I could see Carolina then making an offer there to acquire him and address the goaltending situation going into the postseason. This just, again, Carolina's at the point right now as a team where they feel like that they if they're going to make the Rantanen move, then they're going to need to make at least one other requisite move to fix it. So let's talk about
I had an interaction with a fan that I posted something, and we'll talk about the Leafs in a bit, but they were critical of what Colorado got back in the deal, and I'm like, okay, Rantanen is an unrestricted free agent, and you can't get him signed. He's got a limited no trade, so he can't block it. He can't block a trade. And you got Neckish, and Neckish is under contract for another year. And Drury is a very useful, I'd say, middle
role player. He's a good penalty killer.
I think it was as good if you're trying to do a requisite talent. Getting into what the Avs got here, it's a requisite talent deal. The key thing that everybody is kind of looking at and complaining about is this a move that will disrupt the Avs in terms of their locker room games, how beloved Rantanen was in that room, how he was part of the cup winner. And you kind of sometimes have to look at situations that if you're going to lose it, then you have to at least get requisite talent. And Martin Neckish has a lot of talent.
And he's under contract for another year, so that's manageable at $6.5 million, I believe. And they got 2 draft picks in the deal, and they're probably going to turn those draft picks into another player because they've opened up a little bit of cap space.
Well, that's the bigger thing.
Yes.
Why did they open the cap space? They're still hunting for another player, and we hear all kinds of rumors, and I'm not going to pass around a million rumors, but there are some veterans out there that they probably have their eye on. Yeah. And if they could get one of them, that would be the other reason because they cleared cap space.
And considering the style of player that Neckish is, if you're looking for a player that might be able to play somewhat of the heavy game that Rantanen plays, then that move looks good. If you can at least replace some element.
Yeah, you're not going to get 100
loss with Rantanen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's anybody in this market in terms of a pending free agent that is available that it would work in that aspect. That would. I mean, nobody's going to replace Rantanen because
You're not, but you're going to look to at least if you have a certain style of play and you feel that there's a winger out there that, or that can potentially give you heavy play. You're not going to get the skill level of a Rantanen, but you can get some heavy play that they're going to need.
No, we have to mention this. There is still like this little bit of hope that Gabriel Landeskog comes back. There is a little hope.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens, but that could be it too.
It sounds like they're gonna do a Mark Stone with him and hold him out until the playoffs. So, because
Anthony's point, if all of a sudden he's back, he is that guy.
Yeah, he's heavy. Yeah,
I mean, he may not be that guy anymore, but if he,
we'll see. I mean,
we get a player that's like in the middle six or around there that can at least provide the counter. If Landeskog can play and you can find another player who can do some heavy board work, you're just not going to have necessarily the same level of skill that you have with Rantanen.
Now, sort of the unreported or underreported part of this was the Chicago aspect to it.
Well, there's a good reason,
right? Because I mean they were just the middleman, but them getting a 3rd round pick,
which was theirs. They originally lost to Carolina, they got back.
Right. So them getting a 3rd round pick back. They take 50% of Rantanen's salary, and then they dump Taylor Hall and all $6 million on Carolina. It all depends on what you think Taylor Hall is now, and I don't think there are many people who think he's much anymore.
No, he's a third. No, I think at this point right now for a team like Carolina, he's a bottom 6 winger who might give you a little flash of scoring here or there. It's fun from it. That Carolina getting Hall as a pre-deadline rental perfectly makes sense to me at this point. It's just a fascinating career arc. Maybe one of the most interesting career arcs we've seen
7
years, where you go from a player who is first pick and then an MVP to now where he's at now, and he's not that old yet. Which is
and the funny thing is that, and somebody sent this to me, and it may be wrong, but I think it's pretty accurate. Of a first overall pick, he's played for the most teams. This was the seventh team that he's played for: Edmonton, New Jersey, Arizona, Boston, Buffalo, Chicago, and now Carolina. That's pretty wild.
I mean, you're getting into it's not Marco Arcabella territory, but my goodness, it's
no.
Walt McKechnie for people back in the day. No, and I'm sorry, Sillinger. Doesn't Sillinger hold the record?
Oh yeah, Mike Sillinger too. But again, this is on a whole other level.
But here's my basic other question: why didn't Chicago hold out for a second? A third's not great for this. Because this deal doesn't happen.
It's the weaponized. Again, we keep talking about cap space.
What are they going to do with the cap space?
I think they're going to act as a middleman in a couple more deals. I think,
and considering what's happened this season, I would not be too surprised if Chicago is very much an off-season player in either trades, and acquisitions of some decent salaried players.
Hell, they could be in on Rantanen, Anthony. They could go out and
they very well could be.
I pay $14 million.
Yeah, we haven't. It's not like we haven't seen the Carolina to Chicago train before.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. So, Mike, you talked about the Leafs. What do you want to talk about with the Leafs?
Well, in relation to this, because it came up, it's like, well, if Colorado got this for Mikko Rantanen, why didn't the Leafs do this for Mitch Marner? And I'm like, okay, there is a thing called Puckpedia, folks, and it would be nice if you looked at it and looked at the fact that Mikko Rantanen had I think it was a 9-team no trade clause in his contract. Mitch Marner has a no move, which means you can't deal him unless he wants to go. So morons out there who are saying, well, the Leafs
should that finger, Michael.
They can't do it. Now the thing that I think is interesting and and we've talked about this ad nauseum, Russ, either on the Buzzcast or here, is about Marner and his new contract. Now, there seems to be a moratorium right now on talk about it, but I think this is going to bring it up a little bit. Pierre LeBrun, I think it was last week or the week before, reported that the Leafs have basically said, we are not going to pay you more than Matthews. So your max is $13 million. If you want to make more than $13 million, God bless, but you're not going to get it from Toronto. If that's the methodology of Brad Treliving, and Mitch Marner wants to stay in Toronto, then he takes that deal. And if he doesn't, then him and Rantanen are both out on the free agent market next July. And honestly, if you're putting up Mikko Rantanen and Mitch Marner and I'm bidding, I'm going after Rantanen every day.
There's no question.
Yeah, Rantanen gets more money. He's the more well-rounded player. And this is not an attack on Mitch Marner. We're talking about probably one of the top.
You got to be careful too at Rantanen with it. He does have an injury history too. That's kept him out.
Oh, a bit. Yeah, sure, no doubt.
Sure. But I'm saying,
you ask yourself, of the two players who might age better over time, you do have to take that into account based off stylistic play.
Well, I mean, you have risks with both players. Rantanen, he's bigger. He's had injury problems before. If he slows down a step, he could still be a guy who can play in front of the net and work the boards. Marner, I think the speed, because of his size, is going. Now he's a smart player and he plays the angles well and he does a lot of things well. But if he loses a step in the middle of that contract, he's going to be in that sort of Jeff Skinner situation where in the middle of the contract, because the guy is smaller and the guy slows down, it's going to severely affect his effectiveness.
Yeah, I think this is bad news for Marner for Rantanen kind of being out on the market, because I think everybody assumed that the Avs would get Rantanen signed.
Right.
Here's the crazy thing is that I did not assume that, Russ. I know it's shocking, I think, but I just the more you kept hearing a little bit about where the contract was going to be, and considering how top heavy the Avs were, they were going to need to probably move off some key players in there on their team.
They have done that in the past.
They have done it in the past, but in this case, they did not take that tax. So that's why it wasn't, when I heard that Rantanen was dealt, it was a surprise. I was like, wow. But at the same time, it was like thinking about it, I was like, it does make sense.
Well, this is it. This is my thinking, though. At this point, I know the Leafs would like to keep Marner. If I'm Marner's agent, I fall in line behind Matthews, because if you're looking for greener pastures on the UFA market, you're going to end up in Utah. You might get $13 million, but you're going to end up in Utah. That's what's going to happen.
And I did a piece for the Hockey News where I calculated in terms of taxes what Marner would get on an 8-year deal in Utah, Vegas. Nashville was another team that they were talking about. And on a 7-year deal, he would make more money after taxes than on an 8-year deal with Toronto. But it's like, okay, I get that you want to be that. But if it's important for you to stay in Toronto, then you should be prepared to take a little bit less and get that advertising money you get from Sports Interaction or whatever. And because you're not going to get that selling Jimmy John's in Nashville.
Or ice cream.
Yeah, whatever. It's just like, I mean,
they eat a lot of ice cream in Utah. Everybody knows it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I've never been there, so I'll take your word for it.
No. I'll tell you why. I used to work for an outsourcing company in Utah, and the reason everybody used to eat ice cream is because when it was very hard to find alcohol, that was the replacement, was ice cream. Now it's easier to find alcohol in Utah, so it's not as big a deal.
Alcohol.
Now you can just get rum raisin ice cream, and you can cover both ends.
You cover both. But I do think Marner should fall in line with this, because I just think he could end up like Pete Alonso. Like that could happen.
Right. I mean, if it's important for you to stay in Toronto and probably be the leading scorer in the history of the team, because he's going to get more points than Matthews. But Matthews will lead in goals. He'll be beating Matt Sundin in the next year or so. So we can get that guy off the ledger. If it's important for him, then he, takes 12.75 or 13 million. Gee, I don't think he's going to be hurting. But the cap is going up, and this is the aspect of the story that we'll talk about going forward. It seems that Colorado, with this deal, is indicating they have some sort of internal cap, and with the cap going up to $100 million, it doesn't seem that they're going to be one of those teams that pushes the edge of the envelope and goes all the way to 100 million. There are going to be teams out there like the Rangers, like the Leafs, like Boston, 5, 6, 7 teams, like in baseball. There are teams that will pay over 200 million. And then the middle of the road teams are not going to pay there, and they're not going to pay that.
And you have to remember the ads, they've already committed. You can't say it's like they're not paying. They already have committed, as you said, Mike, they have an internal cap. Right. If they do, they've already committed to the guys at this point now that they, and again, some of this as well, some loyalty, obviously, from a cup-winning team. And I get that sort of emotional, though that can sometimes get you in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
I think, that the Avs are making some kind of adjustment. Are they in for another big trade here before? I think both of the teams who were involved in trades, I think they're both not finished per se.
No, I agree. I just got a text, by the way, from Bobby Holik saying, yeah, remember when the cap was this high?
There was no cap at that
point. There was a cap, but just a dollar figure.
But you know what it is, Anthony? 2 years from now, I think it's 2 years from now, at the end of the 26-27 season, Cale Makar is a free agent. Are you telling me
he's not going to be a free agent?
No. Are you telling me he's not going to be the highest paid defenseman in the NHL? Of course.
No, he'll be the highest paid. That he will absolutely be the highest paid, barring some sort of crazy injury of some kind.
Right. No, he will be.
Stretch. Yeah. He is, he's one of the gold standards in this league. So yeah, they'll get that done. They have to. And again, I get that. You get if you're prioritizing centers. What's the old story? Centers, defense. Then you get to win.
And it might be number one defense over centers now, to be honest, because they're getting rare.
Absolutely. If you get a number one defenseman on a team, it's absolutely critical with the minutes that they're out there on the ice and everything else, and how they can affect the game. And they have to have an internal budget in terms of what they have going.
And defensemen like Heiskanen, Adam Fox, Hughes, Makar. Those are bell cows. Those are guys who play 25 to 27 minutes a night in the playoffs and the regular season.
Offense.
Yeah, and provide offense. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's the big key. So let's talk about I'm just going to say, dumb Will Borgan contract. The reason it's dumb is not because
is this the Ranger version of Andrew McDonald? Is it going to be that kind of a contract?
Close to that. It is. It's close to that. So let me set this up in a way that it's easy to understand. So the Rangers trade Kakko, who maybe did need a change of scenery, but he never really did get enough chance with the kid line and the top six on the top power play. He didn't. Why is he doing well in Seattle? Because he has Shane Wright. Because Kakko's the kind of player that, he needs to get near the net, but he can't bring the puck in his zone and get near the net. He has to have someone do that for him. And then if he's near the net, he's got a great shot, and he can score then. And that's what Shane Wright can do. The Rangers never figured that part out for Kakko, so they trade him. So now they get Will Borgan, who's fine. Will Borgan's fine. He's not a top 4 guy, but they may force him into a top 4 because Lindgren's going to get traded.
I think maybe not on the Range. I think on other teams, I think Borgan is like, when you say top 4, he is 4.
Borderline. Okay.
Let's say 4. Let's say he's like the outside of that as the lesser of the two partners.
It doesn't matter about his age. This is a guy who isn't the fastest guy, and he's a defensive defenseman, right? So we know that you could just look at Rasmus Ristolainen, who's playing fine. But again, teams didn't want to touch him once Chuck Fletcher gave him that long contract. There's a reason. Right. There's a reason. Those guys, you don't know the year that all of a sudden it's going to fall off, like Lindgren.
But you have to remember again what Ristolainen is. Teams still look at him big, strong, fast. Still can
he still has speed.
Covers a lot of ground, which is something again, from a raw physical perspective. If he filled out that game, where his value may be to a team.
But we're missing the aspect here that links all Ristolainen, that links Borgan, that links Matt Roy, who I just pulled up here. They're all right-handed. And that's that in this league right now. I mean, I agree with you, Russ. Borgan is probably a bad 4 and a good 5, but he's right-handed. And if they do get rid of Lindgren, you need Borgan is never gonna score 35, 40 points. He's gonna be like a 20-point defenseman. He's big. He's defensively responsible. He's solid. 4.1.
Russ. Maybe he's kind of maybe you're looking in like in Sealer territory for him.
Yeah, he's like a Nick Seeler. I said he's like a Doug Litster for the old timers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
wow. Thanks.
That's what he's like. But the point is, to give him that term is what's the killer in this deal. Now, why did Drury do that? Because if he didn't do that, everybody would be like, why did you trade Kakko for this?
Everybody does that,
forced into this deal.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
basically to say that you're committed and you think this guy is a building block for you.
Clearly, you had to make a commitment to Borgan after you traded a former second overall pick.
Yes.
And like I said, I mean, do I think he's a great defenseman? No, I think he's a solid right hand, big defenseman.
I think if you have a really more talented partner, that's where he covers.
Yeah.
Borgan, I think, can cover a more talented partner or offensively.
Yeah, hey, look, he shots blocks. He does a lot like you talk about.
He's very Sealer. He's very Sealer-like to me.
We also see that Nick Seeler getting 5 blocks, 10 blocks a game. We see the toll that it's taking on him. We see it
on the whole team. I think in this case, because the Flyers
shot. We'll get to that, and we'll get to
Russ,
that.
So Russ, you think the blueprint here is now that they've signed Borgan, they probably keep Keandre Miller and they trade Lindgren?
Right. That's what they're doing now because they believe, and there's some short-term evidence that says, hey, Miller's playing better with Borgan there. Okay, sure. I mean, but that's not a great sign for Miller because his defense is dropped, but he does still have that offense.
It allows him to, if that at the end of the day, Russ, if what his game is more offensively bent, more up and down the ice.
Yeah,
this is where you do want to have a partner, like I say, a Lidster-esque, Sealer-esque.
Right.
Borgan to cover on that back end, but you're paying a bit of a premium in this.
Right.
But I have to say that I do like the right side of the Rangers blue line now with Fox, Schneider, and Borgan. That's pretty solid.
Schneider's really had a good year. Schneider's come up and performed. Look, the quick thing is, and we'll be off the Rangers, they're not making the playoffs, so it doesn't matter. Anyhow, moving on.
I'm ready to go there yet, but
yeah, I'm ready. Moving on, let's talk about right-handed defensemen, Mike, because Tony DAngelo's back.
Yes.
And
yes. This just
we all thought that was going to be the big news on Friday, and
this just shows, and we when we talked about the Klingberg contract with Edmonton, it's like, okay, Klingberg's a good guy, good player, but it's questionable whether he'll ever contribute anything close to what he did when he was in Dallas in his prime. But it was a free swing, and it makes sense for Edmonton. And then I got, because supposedly Toronto was interested in Klingberg, bringing him back. But then I had people saying, well, what about Tony DAngelo? Okay, this is a cancer that you're inserting into the line. This shows the desperation of Lou Lamoriello and Patrick Waugh. And, if he was a good defenseman, they had to put him on waivers. He cleared no problem because nobody wants to touch this guy.
There's two reasons.
Getting that signed because they knew nobody was going to touch him.
Of course. There's another thing, too. A lot of people don't want to pick up guys that Lou has waived. There is that factor, too.
Yes.
That's still a factor.
You screw Lou, he's going to.
Yes. I'll get you.
Yeah. That's still a factor in this league.
You
can never deny that. But the fact is, and people are going to be like, "Well, you're being unfair at DAngelo." Okay, well, here's how we're being fair. When the last time he scored 42 points, which was with the Flyers, he was a minus 27. Right. He's a minus the minute he gets on the ice. Now he can skate and he will provide some offense. That's an old Jaromir Jagr quote. When he was in Washington, he said
minus the
minute he steps on the ice. That was what Jagr said.
It was his first couple of shifts they had a goal against. He was a -1 already.
Right. It's one of the great quotes in hockey history. It was, and I just repurposed it. But the point is, that's where DAngelo's at. He's strictly a power play, moving the puck guy who can create some offense and doesn't play a lick of defense. Like that's it.
And the funny thing is if he wasn't such a cancer in the locker room and have caused the problems that he's caused in numerous cities in this league, a team like Toronto who could use a power play quarterback might have been interested in him. But because of all those ancillary issues, I don't even think that he was.
My phrasing always with DAngelo is he's like an evil Shane Gostisbehere.
Like if DAngelo went and became a Leaf, he would get Mitch Marner to move to Sewell, New Jersey, and then Mitch Marner would become a Devil. That's what would happen.
I mean, it's just, and it says not knowing, again, dealing, it's a situation where with him, it's just like, there's always going to be a spot for a right-handed offensive defenseman in the NHL. You'd have plenty more opportunities to stick if you just kind of got out of your own way.
He's a right-handed American Eric Gustafson who's a jerk.
Right. So we move on.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Sabres, Mike. I know the season's over. We can hold up the sign if we want to, but we know their season's over. This one's undeniable, and you could say you're not there yet, and I don't care, but you won't say that for them.
For what?
But for the Sabres,
that their season's over.
Yes.
Well, the season in terms of
you won't even say it for them.
The season in terms of making the postseason.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah, there's other things. Yeah, if you're saying the season.
No, it's for the postseason.
We should say your postseason hopes are
done. They're absolutely done.
Stamped on. Lindy drove over them. It's over.
Yeah, I'll get the sign again if you need it.
No.
But
So David Carl should take over, right?
Listen, don't say that flippantly.
He's not leaving. He's not going anywhere.
Don't say that flippantly. There's probably a lot of teams that are going to discuss.
I'm well aware of that. That's why I'm saying. Why do you think I threw it out there?
I know. With David Carl, who I've had a lot of interactions with, and he's a really smart guy. But the fact that he's a really smart guy might mean he doesn't go anywhere because he has a long-term deal where he is. So we'll see. But go ahead, what is the hope for the rest of the season for the Sabres?
Well, I mean, okay, they're 14 points out of the wild card spot. They're done. So that's over with. And, right now, normally you would be saying, okay, Kevin Adams is going to trade his pending unrestricted free agents. They could get a significant return for Jason Zucker, who's having a good year. Yoki Haru, Greenway when he comes back. If a team needs a backup goaltender, James Reimer. But that doesn't really do anything in terms of, you get some draft picks, but unless you convert them into players who have term, and you build this team because you need players who can stay, want to stay, or have to stay because of the contract situation. But we've sort of theorized that something big is going to happen. But my theory has been, does the organization trust Kevin Adams to make the big move? And I don't know. I'm hesitant on that. And the report that came out yesterday from Elliot Friedman during his second period spot on Hockey Night in Canada about the Sabres being the favorite to land Elias Pettersson. I mean, okay, you have to go to Vancouver here. Apparently, they're not getting the offers that they want for JT Miller.
No.
So if that's the case, then the default is trading Pettersson because they have to rectify the situation. And you can get a return on Pettersson because he's younger, because he doesn't have any no trade protection, and his new 8-year deal doesn't kick in until next year. And that's when the no move clause kicks in.
Fans are going to be really upset, though, because this is a situation where fans definitely like Pettersson more. They have more invested in Pettersson than Miller. But like you said, Mike, that this is how it may end up.
Right. Yeah. And now, extrapolate from that and go to the Sabres side here, because you don't know what the deal is. If this does come to fruition, you would have to imagine that Dylan Cousins is part of the deal.
I would assume that. And
the thing is, I would assume that Bowen Byram is part of the deal as well, because
I would think both.
Yeah, because Vancouver has wanted Bowen. Right, or a player who was a first round pick, somebody like Isaac Rozan or something, and then maybe it gets a little bigger from the Vancouver side. But okay, so then you have a 1-2 punch up the middle with Pettersson and Tage Thompson playing second line center. That's a good foundation there, but you don't know what Pettersson would be like moving from the west to the east. He's had injury issues.
Sure.
He has. I wouldn't say concentration issues, but I think the whole thing between him and Miller is that he's a very low key dude, and Miller's a red ass, and they clash. And will that low key mood fly in Buffalo? I don't think it does. Buffalo is a team that likes a red ass. That's the
reason why I have concerns about this in terms of any kind of deals in this case, because it's one thing to be a cool customer. It's another thing
to be nonplussed.
He would not necessarily be the first player who, I guess, and this is not be a character thing here, but it's not. He wouldn't be the first player who would have gotten a contract. Right. And this was once that contract was assigned. Like hockey is a means to an end.
This is Jeff Carter, Mike Richards, James Van Riemsdyk territory. Before the new contract kicks in, you trade them.
That's why, and I do believe that's what this is right now. Is just I think they were hoping that he was going to take on another level of I don't want to use maturity. It's just sometimes guys are who they are.
What I'm surprised at,
incredibly talented and not not always be 100% engaged, knowing that you're that talented.
What I'm surprised here, Russ, and I remember after there was a lot of hue and cry when those deals were made by Philadelphia, that they sort of skirted around the no trade, no move clauses by moving the player before July the 1st when it kicked in. I believe there is something when you sign a player to a long-term deal that if both sides agree, the no move clause starts at the point that the extension is signed. They didn't do that with Pettersson. They left the window.
Teams aren't going to do that. Teams will not. They'll wait until because they have a window. They'll never give up that window. They'll never give up that window.
Unless it's a player like Matthews or something like that you're not going to trade.
Here's the other thing, though, Mike. Looking at the landscape with the Sabres, look, I'm not still 100% thrilled with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He's okay, but he's not great yet. I don't know if he ever will be. But in this deal, because of Thatcher Demko's knees, Devin Levi could be in this deal.
I mean, and they love Lankinen, and they're trying to get Lankinen signed, and maybe they think they have they have a pairing with Demko and Lankinen that they think that they're satisfied with. But to your point, Lucan, I think Lucan has been a victim of a porous Buffalo defense that hasn't gotten any better. And the thing is, every time they bring up Devin Levi, he gets smoked. I mean, his stats in limited games, I think it's 7 or 8 games, have been terrible. He's playing great in the American Hockey League, which I think is a commentary on how badly the Sabres are playing defensively. But I do think, and I've said this for a while, I think he's a trade piece because if they're going to play Lucan 60 games a year, you can't.
And again, long term, just from the fact that they have him signed long term in this case, they're going to make a commitment going forward. Levi's not going to have that opportunity.
Right. And they have to be wary next July because they'll qualify him, obviously, but his ELC will be over with and they qualify him. He could get an offer sheet. It could be a Broberg Holloway situation.
I don't think he's done enough for that.
Well, I see, Russ, what did Broberg do?
Broberg at least done what? Yep. Even though I am not the biggest fan, he was always a good puck mover. His defense was in question, but he played a lot of minutes. He did enough.
Questions whether or not he's a Klingberg.
Right.
But there are people out there other than people in the Sabres organization that believe that Levi is a gem, that he's a really good goaltender. And you may have somebody who says, okay, I'll offer him like $1 less than what a qualification for a first round pick.
Maybe.
And the thing is with the Sabres, they have all the cap room in the world, but do they want to be spending $9 million in cap space on goaltending when they can't even get a sniff of the playoffs? So that's the dilemma.
Two more quick things. There is a trend in the league, and I give David St. Louis, who I work with at EP, credit for this. He had noticed and noted on Twitter that, hey, all of a sudden teams are putting some of their top prospects on the top line, and they're performing. And Juraj Slafkovsky is one of those guys. They went back to him on the top line around December 15th. I just wrote something on Hockey News. And he's got 13 out of his 28 points in that time frame. He got 2 assists last night. Mm-hmm. It's amazing when you actually put a guy who you hope is your franchise player with other franchise players. Like, it's
correct.
I mean, Russ,
it's fine. And we'll get to the Flyers in a minute.
It's steeped in history, and I'll stick with Montreal. Lafleur played on the third line for a couple years before they actually gave him first line ice time.
1975, whatever.
Right. No, I'm just saying it's not unique. The fact that sometimes they bury, top prospects in, hoping that they learn how to
play Claude Giroux, on the wing on a lower line,
Yeah, even that was 15 years ago or more.
Exactly. They do. That happens. I mean, it's because you're just trying to get, but then we're going to complain about the fact that you want to have talent throughout your lineup, right?
Right.
So that's the window to open the door, I think, for some of those players. And then when they show out, you get what you
now
want.
we can enter the Matvei Michkov discussions because John Tortorella is doing it the old school way. And I think that was fine for a little while. But I think to have this keep going for a whole season isn't great for the kid, only because you're essentially making him invisible in some of these games because of the defensive responsibilities he has. Now, he's doing a pretty good job with it. But there is a point where I think you need to let up on that and let the other parts of his game take over. And I don't think the Flyers.
It also depends on the players that he's playing. It does depend on the players that he's playing with. And I love Sean Couturier. Don't get me wrong, but there are limitations with his game. And I think, again, if Torts is looking at this long term and trying to turn Michkov into a really great overall player for the long term, I'm okay with that idea. The thing is, what I think has happened with Philly is that some of the other lines have clicked, and it's kind of like they're kind of playing those guys in that role and almost, I don't want to say sheltering Michkov, but they kind of are. And I do have to take that into account, Russ, that he is playing. This is going to be this is his first season in the NHL. Mm-hmm. It's just different than playing in the K.
Sure.
And I have to keep that in the back of my head for his long-term development. Sure. That this is his first season in the league, and that when you get, there's times where I definitely think that the grind of the NHL is catching with him a little bit.
I mean, it's Celebrini's first season too.
I agree with that, but again, you also have Celebrini who's coming out of college versus Michkov with the whole transition of.
It's different.
There's a lot of different things with Michkov that I have to take into account for how Tortorella is handling him versus a Celebrini who really, again, North American kid, played, obviously college hockey. Mm-hmm. And again, he's in a first place in a role. For a team like San Jose, who the expectations aren't very high, it's great that his first season is going as well as it is Celebrini. And there's obviously a very good chance here that he will beat out Michkov for the Calder Trophy here.
But as we talked about,
there's also a little known thing here. Celebrini's different than what the Hawks did with Connor Bedard. They did let Bedard do everything, just whatever he wanted. Yes. Didn't have to play defense, and he had a great season. Now he's having a little bit of a slump because it's harder to all of a sudden have to round out your game in your second year, and that's what happens to some players. But I looked it up for Celebrini. He's got 31% defensive zone starts. He has always had good defensive instincts. And it doesn't matter that he's a mighty.
Known that from his days in college, that he was a more well-rounded guy coming into the league than even Bedard was.
Stronger, he's stronger.
No, but I think there's a misnomer out there that Celebrini, like the Sharks aren't good, so it doesn't matter if.
But he's getting opportunity. You have to keep in mind with the Sharks, he is getting the Sharks' expectation going into the season versus, let's say, the Flyers.
Right.
The expectation, you do have to take that into account.
No, that's fair.
Hey, we're not that good, so we can have him play the deep end of the pool. And if we need to pull him back, he's done well in that role.
But I think that's fair.
But then we're talking about something that we've talked about a lot. What should be the expectations for the Flyers as opposed?
Well, that's the whole thing. So after the Danny Briere press conference, it then created another divide in the Flyers fan base. Are you rebuilding? Are you not? Because they're 5 points out. The math isn't great. They're behind a bunch of teams.
No, I think there's realism with regards to it. I think the problem with the Flyers are doing in many ways, similar to last season, although last season they got off to a rocket start and fell back. This year it's been vacillating between get a short good run and then there's something that causes a step back. The two losses, obviously, to the Rangers and the Islanders, both regulation losses, really kind of take out the starch of whatever, of the streak they had prior to that. I think Briere, for the most part, that's the reason why he isn't sort of committed to going after. Again, there's not much available in the market to begin with if you're trying to make that push to be a playoff team. And the thing that we all know that holds them back is the pivot position. And I don't get the feeling at all that they're going to be buyers at all. I think they will be moving.
Right.
They'll be moving guys off.
Let me ask you this, Anthony, because I look at them right now, and they've got a couple restricted free agents in Morgan Frost and Noah Cates, and Cam York is up for a new contract. If they do decide we're sellers, they don't have a bunch of pending UFAs. So who are they selling?
At this point right now, I think we know that they're trying to – I think if they do try to make a move off to get assets, Ristolainen is going to be one.
Right.
Question is about, whether Philly's retaining on that.
Right.
And I'm sure if for them to get value in the circumstance, the team's going to say, hey, we like what Ristolainen's turning into, but it's this year, and he had previous injury history, so that's all going to factor into it.
Yeah.
There are some other things that are certainly coming up and on the horizon.
The other one.
Laughton's another one, but I think they're very – this is one of the more complicated things for Danny here, because I think they really do like Scott. They really like Laughton a lot.
Sure.
He's a Flyers type player.
He's a Flyers type player, but what I will also say is Noah Cates, I think, is developing into whatever role Laughton's in. If you think you can get returns in this circumstance, and if Cates is becoming an NHL center, which he's giving indication that he is an NHL center, whether he's a 2 or I don't know if he's I don't know. I think he's a high level 3 more than a 2. Obviously clicking with good line mates in this case. If you know that, I think you have to then take a look at, okay, what's the top side for Laughton versus what may be the top side for Cates, and make that decision based on that. And if you know you're not in the playoff race, and it's several years now, I think at a certain point you have to say, if somebody's coming to you with a pretty decent offer for Scott Laughton, I think you're probably going to need to consider that move. But I think it's Ristolainen. Laughton's another one. Farabee's another one that might is going to draw some interest, I think, as well.
For teams like Buffalo who are looking for players with term.
Yeah, in that circumstance, I think the question is whether or not you think you've capped up as far as you can with in other words, for what those players can contribute to you, versus thinking about, a little bit more about the long term. So
Seth Appert knows what Farabee used to be, so that could help with.
And again, it depends on what the return would be in that circumstance of who you're going to be getting back from Buffalo. If it's just picks, if you're trying to fill for a pivot position, if we've had that discussion about some certain Sabre players on that might be of interest to the Flyers, but it's just I think they have to be smart about this and remember that if they are where they are in the postseason race and remain there, they have to, especially after Four Nations is over. I think at that point, Danny's going to will be more in a selling mode, I think, than a buying mode.
Yeah, and I'll take him at his word that he's retaining his RFAs. So Mike,
I think Cates is staying. York is certainly staying.
Right.
He and
Frost is staying too, based on what he said.
What's that?
This means Frost is staying too, based on what he
We'll
said.
see again. That's going to be an interesting one there. I'm going to be curious to see what happens there with regards to Frost, because again, another year of evaluating with him, determining what he is. I
think the odds are better of Frost staying if there's a coaching change at the end of the year.
Well, anything's possible. So
we'll see on that front. I think but I think there's also, there's I don't think it's just Torts in that circumstance.
No.
In terms of when it comes to Frost, I think there's I think there's others that kind of look at that may look at Frost and be kind of what RNA. We're still not sure what exactly he is.
That's why the RFA exists, because you still have that extra time.
Mm-hmm.
And you still have rights. So that's it. That's it for Off the Post. We'll catch everybody next time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.